There are good literature reviews and you can say bad literature reviews. So there are certain pitfalls that we will discuss that actually stand in the way of deeper critical analysis of literature review. Generally, good literature reviews are literature reviews that involve the process of deeper critical analysis. Now, so the question is, why is it that some researchers, especially student researchers, find it difficult to have to do deeper critical analyses during their literature review? So here are certain factors that might lead to literature reviews that are not considered as good quality literature reviews. So the first one is lack of clear focus. In many cases, it happens that research students or junior researchers find it difficult to have a focus and to keep a focus of their literature. This happens generally due to difficulty in narrowing down literature review. So in many cases, we know that there are certain topics which have a lot of background, and it is quite difficult for beginning researchers who have lesser understanding of the particular field to narrow down the literature review in line with the objectives or research questions that they are actually exploring. So that's the first thing that can lead to, you can say, less good quality literature review. Secondly, attempting to cover too much. In many cases, junior researchers or student researchers try to cover too much in the limited time and space that they have during their research project. So if they are attempting to cover too much, to include too much of the material in their literature reviews, that can lead to a problem. Thirdly, loss of focus on central arguments. In many cases, again, the literature review should revolve around a central argument, and the argument is basically in response to the research questions and the research topic. So if that argument, if the researchers lose focus of that argument and they kind of go here and there instead of keeping the focus on that central argument that revolves around the centrality of their topic, that is something that will ultimately result in kind of hampering the quality of their research or of their literature review. Next is insufficient critical engagement. Critical engagement is extremely important, which actually means that evaluating not just the argument, but coming up with counter arguments with analysis and synthesis. This is something that is very important, and in many cases there is insufficient critical engagement on the part of the junior researchers, student researchers. This happens in the presentation of the literature, in summarizing literature without questioning for example, the methodologies that the previous researchers have used in coming up with arguments or coming up with evidence. In many cases, there are certain assumptions that researchers have when they are presenting particular viewpoints. So if you ignore those assumptions, or if you are not aware of those assumptions, that can lead to insufficient critical engagement of the literature. Again, in many cases, there are conclusions that are coming up from researchers when they're conducting their studies. So if you just take their conclusions on the face value without putting them to critical review, that will again lead to insufficient critical engagement and superficial understanding of the particular topics. Generally, this happens when student researchers have not read extensively and intensively in the areas in which they are working. So these are some of the reasons that can lead to insufficient critical engagement, which will be a pitfall. Now the next pitfall is the confirmation bias. Sometimes researchers, especially junior researchers, are interested in just confirming the particular viewpoints that they prefer due to one reason or another reason. So this confirmation bias can happen mainly because there is selective inclusion of literature. So the researchers, the junior researchers, are interested in actually taking viewpoints that actually confirm their particular viewpoints or biases. Secondly, this can happen when the researchers are interested in finding only support for preconceived notions or hypotheses that they have. So they might have certain notions about certain things or certain ideas or certain situations, and they just want support for that. Those preconceived notions and hypotheses that they have might hamper the process of integrity, and so that can result in bias. Then ignoring or undervaluing contradictory evidence, which is like the other thing that one should avoid in order to have good quality literature review. So if as researcher you are ignoring or undervaluing contradictory evidence against perhaps the hypotheses that you have or the assumptions that you have, that will again be something that should not be encouraged. Then inadequate understanding of the theoretical frameworks. So as we know that theoretical frameworks are actually frameworks that weave together, that connect various theories related to particular topics or particular areas of our interest. So in order to have good understanding of the theoretical frameworks, we need to have extensive and intensive reading related to the various theories that are connecting the topic that we are working on or various aspects of those topics. So if we lack reading in those areas or expertise or understanding, that will lead to inadequate grasp of the theoretical frameworks. And so those theoretical frameworks that underpin the literature review, and so this can actually lead to, in many cases, misinterpretation or overinterpretation of the key concepts, and as a result, this will lead to limiting the depth of our analysis. So the next thing that we can consider as a possible pitfall in the way of quality literature review is over-reliance on secondary sources. Generally, it is a very good practice for researchers to get to primary sources, because primary sources are the basic sources of information or knowledge, which actually means the original books from which those original ideas have come, or the research papers or other sources. In many cases, due to lack of resources, due to lack of maybe drive, due to in some cases due to lack of laziness or something, what can happen is that we as beginning researchers might rely too much on secondary sources, and in many cases secondary sources might not be truly representing the primary sources or the information and knowledge in the primary sources. So again, that can lead to a problem, and so we can misinterpret because we did not engage directly with the primary literature, and so we as a result we might not be able to have deeper analyses or authentic knowledge that is needed for that deeper analysis. The next one is failure to identify gaps and controversies. So in many cases, it is very important for good quality literature review that we as researchers should identify gaps in our understanding or gaps in the theory and practice of certain topics that we are working on. If we fail to identify those gaps clearly, that and possible controversies or debates in particular areas that can lead to our lack of understanding of that topic, then reviews that fail to highlight the need for further research or the complexities of the topic. So in some cases, topics are complex and the literature review that fails to clearly identify gaps and also the significance of filling those gaps is something that could be considered as a possible pitfall. Now, the other things include that we can consider as possible pitfalls in the way of good quality literature review is poor synthesis of ideas. So it is important for junior researchers to synthesize ideas, that actually is to interconnect ideas, to link ideas, and so poor synthesis or poor connection of ideas can ultimately result in lack of coherence in the argument that we are presenting in the literature review. It could also lead to lack of linking up of ideas into a whole narrative or a whole story. You can think of literature review as telling a story, connecting the dots, connecting the ideas, and connecting the various viewpoints and arguments and counter arguments related to the topic. So if there is this is something that is lacking there, that will lead to poor synthesis of ideas and ultimately to poor quality of literature review. Lack of understanding of the bigger picture, again, mainly because the ideas have not been connected, that could also be a possible pitfall. Inadequate citation and referencing, again, citation, referencing, providing evidence for the argument or for the counter argument, providing evidence for ideas and counter ideas is extremely important. So we can say that we will be compromising the credibility of our literature review if our understanding and our evidence of the citations or referencing is incomplete or incorrect, and in some cases it could be irrelevant. All of these can compromise our literature review and its quality. Next, overemphasis on quantity or quality. In some cases, junior researchers might think that producing a lot of literature review and adding to the bulk of the literature review and to the overall thesis is something that's a good thing. So in many cases that might be the requirement of the topic, but in other cases, overemphasis on quantity over the quality of the literature review can result in our loss of focus or the breadth or the depth of analysis of our literature review. So that is something that can also lead to a compromise on the quality of the literature review. And lastly, time management is extremely important. In many cases, we know that research takes place in particular time. So there are schedules and times and deadlines, and the length of our research reports. So we need to properly manage time. If we cannot manage time, what will happen is that this will lead to, in some cases, rushed reviews or reviews that are just rushed through, just adding information, more and more information without bringing in the critical analysis aspect of it. And so the result will be lack of deeper critical engagement with our literature. And so ultimately, because of the lack of time management, the result will be poor quality of literature review. So these were some of the important pitfalls that can compromise, that can lead to a compromise on the quality of of our literature review, and that can result in superficial literature review, that can result in our lack of critical engagement with the literature review, and as a result, that will be something that will not be considered as scholarly adequate, especially at the research at the PhD level. So we need to take care of these pitfalls in order to produce good quality literature reviews.